Picture this. You are in the presence of one of the world's most esteemed spiritual leaders, a man whose teachings have transformed numerous lives. Yet the person sitting across from him isn't a monk, priest, or renowned philosopher. It's Kendrick Lamar, a rapper from Compton. And not just any rapper. He's one of the most talented and bold artists in hip-hop history. He looks Eckhart Tolle in the eye and says, "I want to incorporate your teachings into my rap music." If that statement didn't resonate with you as it did with Tolle, then you might be missing the significance of the moment, as what followed became one of the most surprising and influential collaborations in music history.
Kendrick Lamar contacted me and says, "I want to introduce your teaching into my rap music." I said, "Before you do anything, I want to talk to you." So I met him, and he was not how you would expect a flamboyant rapper to behave or look like. He was kind of soft-spoken, gentle, and able to listen. And then I said, "Okay, go ahead."
Help him express that journey through music is a reserved German spiritual teacher who had never been exposed to hip-hop until Kendrick reached out to him. Welcome to Celebrity Rap Life, where the red carpets never roll up and the spotlight never fades. The rewards are legendary, because in celebrity rap life, every downfall can become a comeback, and every headline tells a deeper story. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of what's coming next. To understand why this collaboration is so crazy, you have to understand who Eckhart Tolle actually is. Tolle was born in Germany in 1948, and his life was anything but easy from the jump. He struggled with deep depression for most of his younger years, the kind of darkness that swallows you whole and makes you feel like there is no point in anything. He eventually made his way to Cambridge University in England to pursue his doctorate, but something shifted in him during that time. In 1977, while he was supposed to be grinding through his studies, he had what he describes as a spiritual awakening, a moment so powerful and so real that it completely changed the direction of his life. He walked away from his doctorate, walked away from everything that was expected of him, and spent years wandering, studying, and figuring out what that experience meant. Eventually, he started teaching others, and his ideas began to spread quietly through word of mouth. Then, in 1997, he published a book called The Power of Now, and that book changed everything. It taught people one simple but devastating idea: stop living in your head. Stop replaying past. Stop worrying about the future. The only real moment you have is right now, this very second. And if you can actually sit inside that truth and feel it, your whole life starts to shift. The book became a New York Times bestseller, and when Oprah Winfrey put it on her show in 2000, it exploded into mainstream culture overnight. By 2011, Tolle was ranked the most spiritually influential person in the world by the Watkins Review. This was not some side hustle. This man had quietly become one of the most important voices in modern spirituality, and his reach kept growing year after year. Now, fast forward to Kendrick Lamar. By the time he started working on what would become Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, Kendrick had already proven himself to be something rare. He had won 14 Grammy Awards. He had won the Pulitzer Prize for music, the first rapper in history to do so. He had put out album after album that pushed the boundaries of what hip-hop could say and how it could say it. But behind all that success, behind all the accolades and the stages and the sold-out arenas, Kendrick was carrying something heavy. He was going through a period of intense personal reckoning. He was dealing with generational trauma that had been passed down through his family for years. He was confronting his own flaws, his own mistakes, the kind of stuff that most people in his position would bury and never talk about publicly. But Kendrick is not most people. He had started going to therapy, and for the first time in his life, he was truly sitting with the pain instead of running from it. And somewhere in the middle of that process, he picked up Eckhart Tolle's writings and something clicked. Nobody knows exactly when Kendrick first read Tolle or which book grabbed him first, but it is clear that the teachings hit him on a level that went beyond just intellectual curiosity. These were not just nice ideas on a page. They were tools. They were a way of looking at the mind and the ego and the pain body that directly connected to what Kendrick was working through in his own therapy sessions. The concept of the pain body, one of Tolle's most famous ideas, is basically the idea that humans carry around a massive energy field of accumulated emotional pain, and that energy field feeds on more pain because it wants to survive. It is not just a thought, it's something that lives inside you and controls your behavior if you let it. When Kendrick encountered that idea, it must have felt like someone had just turned on the lights in a dark room. He had been living inside his own pain body his entire life without knowing what it was or why it kept pulling him back into the same cycles over and over again. So Kendrick did something bold. He reached out to Eckhart Tolle directly. He picked up the phone and called this man, this quiet German spiritual teacher, who by his own admission was not in touch with popular culture very much. And Kendrick told him what he wanted to do. He wanted to weave Tolle's teachings into a rap album. He wanted to take ideas that had mostly lived in bookstores and meditation retreats and bring them into the ears of millions of people who would never pick up a self-help book on their own. Tolle himself said that when the call came in, he only knew Kendrick by name. He was not familiar with his music or his legacy, but after doing some research and learning about who Kendrick was and what the album was meant to be about, Tolle was genuinely interested. He told interviewers later that he's always looking for ways to spread his teachings to people who would not otherwise encounter them, especially in the mainstream. And a rap album from one of the biggest artists on the planet was about as mainstream as it gets. What makes this whole thing even more layered is that the collaboration didn't happen in a vacuum. On the album itself, in the track called Father Time, you can actually hear Kendrick's partner Whitney urging him to seek help. She tells him straight up, "You need to talk to somebody, reach out to Eckhart Tolle." That line is not scripted fiction for dramatic effect. It reflects the real dynamic in Kendrick's life at that time. Whitney saw what he was going through. She saw him struggling with things he had never confronted before, and she pointed him towards Tolle as part of his healing. The fact that Kendrick was willing to let that moment live on the album, to let the audience hear his partner push him toward vulnerability, says everything about the kind of honesty this project demanded from him. Once the collaboration was locked in, Tolle's voice became woven throughout the entire album like a thread holding the whole thing together. On Savior Interlude, Tolle warns against building your entire identity around being a victim, and he gives a real example of how someone can start defining themselves by the things that were done to them as a child. That sets up everything Kendrick is about to confess on the tracks that follow. Then later, right before the emotional climax of the album, on the track called Mr. Morale, Tolle speaks about the pain body and how this energy field almost has a life of its own, how it takes people over if they aren't aware of it. And then the very next track is Mother I Sober, where Kendrick rips open the most painful parts of his life and lays them bare for the whole world to hear. The placement of Tolle's words is not random, it's surgical. Every time his voice appears, it prepares the listener for something deeper, something raw, something that is about to land hard. There's also a moment on Count Me Out where you can hear what sounds like an actual session between Kendrick and Tolle addresses him by his middle name, Duckworth. That detail is small but significant because it shows that this was not just a studio performance where Tolle came in, read some lines into a microphone and left. There was a real relationship forming here. There was a real conversation happening between these two men about the nature of pain, identity, ego, and what it actually means to heal. The album dropped on May 13, 2022, and the response was massive. Critics called it one of the most vulnerable and honest albums ever made in hip-hop. It won Best Rap Album at the Grammy Awards and received 8 nominations total, including Album of the Year. But beyond the awards and the reviews, what stuck with people most was the emotional weight of the whole experience. This was not an album you could put on in the background. It demanded your full attention. It demanded that you sit with uncomfortable truths about yourself, and Tolle's presence throughout the project was a big reason why it carried that kind of gravity. After the album came out, Kendrick was photographed on a beach in Ghana being interviewed by Spotify. A short clip from that conversation made its way online, and in it, Kendrick says something that stopped a lot of people in their tracks. He says he couldn't even tell you what day it is because he had just been living in the moment. Anyone who had read Tolle or listened closely to Mr. Morel knew exactly what that statement meant. It wasn't casual. It was Kendrick showing that the teachings had not just been something he used for an album, they had actually changed how he was moving through his own life. When someone shared that clip with Tolle and asked him what he thought, Tolle smiled and said that what Kendrick experiences from time to time, especially during the creative process, is the ability to step out of the stream of thought and touch a deeper level of being where you become present to your own existence. That's about as close as you're going to get to a spiritual teacher saying, "Yeah, this rapper actually gets it."
Tolle also spoke openly about why he agreed to do the interview with Complex magazine after the album came out. He said the only reason he sat down to talk was because he wanted to help connect his ideas with Kendrick's fanbase. He said that maybe for some of them, it could be the beginning of their awakening. He explained that spiritual awakening is not about having visions or seeing angels or following a specific religion. It is something simpler and deeper than all of that. It is the moment when awareness shows up in a person for the first time, when they start to actually see their own mind instead of being completely controlled by it. And if a double album from Kendrick Lamar could be the doorway that leads someone to that moment, then in Tolle's eyes, every second of his involvement was worth it. What Kendrick and Tolle built together on Mr. Morel and the Big Steppers is something that hip-hop has rarely seen. It is not just an album, it is a case study in what happens when a man decides to stop running from the worst parts of himself and actually face them. Kendrick wore a crown of thorns on the album cover, a symbol of suffering and sacrifice, and that image says it all. He was not trying to look cool or untouchable. He was showing the world that he was bleeding, that he was in it, that he was choosing to heal even when it hurt. And he found a teacher, an unlikely one from a completely different world, who had the language and framework to help him make sense of the chaos inside his own mind. The fact that he then decided to share all of that with the world through music is what makes Kendrick Lamar one of the most important artists of his generation. He did not just make a record, he built a bridge between two worlds that most people would never think could connect. And he proved that healing is not something you have to do alone in the dark. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people hear you go through it. This story is far from over, and the truth is still unfolding. I want to hear what you think. Drop your take in the comments. And if you don't want to miss the next twist, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of what's coming next.